Do scientists have to learn philosophy?
Um, I think that scientists can benefit from learning philosophy because it can help them to frame questions and analyze questions and ask questions.
And they have these degrees, right? They're doctors of philosophy, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's
Because long ago, it used to be that actually everyone was a philosopher, or at least scientists and philosophers were really engaged in the same project.
But there was some kind of cleavage on Earth where the two separated?
Yes, well, I think the big cleavage came when empirical methods, in other words, looking at data,
Hmm.
became a central part of what we now call science. And philosophy, while it doesn't ignore data, focuses more on the theoretical.
so the scientists are sort of picking apart whether something is apparent or not.
Hmm. Sometimes, yeah, yeah, and I think in a very broad sense, the methods are very similar. We use a lot of inference to the best explanation in both areas, but um, maybe many scientists anyway will take the data first or weight the data very heavily and then draw conclusions from that, where philosophers tend to think about a lot of things at first, and this is very crude, and then look at data to some extent, sometimes, or sometimes we just think about things and think about all kinds of crazy things, right? Because that's what we do. We specialize in thinking.
And you specialize in a very distinct kind of thinking. You think a lot about. What do you think a lot about?
Oh, well, I think a lot about everything. Sometimes
Okay.
that gets difficult, but I think I'm especially interested in um, big decisions. I'm especially interested in the nature of the self and how we experience the world and how the world constructs who we are and how our actions construct who we are.
So you must be getting a lot of raw material to think about right now on Earth.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy time. And one of the things I'm most interested in is like how we understand and respond to really different, new, radical, crazy things. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. And for pretty much everyone, maybe not quite everyone, but just about everyone, this is a really new kind of experience.
And so, what have you seen? What are the conclusions that you're coming to?
Well, so for me, what's been, and because I think about these things, there's a way in which it's not surprising that we flail around like we've been flailing around when we're faced with a kind of radically new experience. Yeah, exactly. Flail, it's like we don't know what's happening, sort of bounce back and forth between different options. There's a lot of real uncertainty and fear. And also people kind of point fingers a lot when there are a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of interested in
Mm,
this in very abstractly because I don't think it's the only sort of situation where we do this, but it's interesting to kind of live through it. You can talk about something in a very theoretical way, but then to live through the kind of radical uncertainty and unknowability that this pandemic is bringing to us and see how it's changing me and the people around me, that's very interesting. Like all of a sudden, I feel like a scientist, right? Like I'm actually like looking at the world and seeing something in action that might even fit my theories.
and are you able to advise some, you know,
Best practices?
Mm.
sure, decision makers, big scale decision makers, or even just the people around you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I try to be careful about that. I try not to go around telling people what to do or even advising them what to do.
It's a lot
I'm
of
better at bringing
responsibility.
problems. Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, and I like to think about things a lot, but I always feel that there's a lot of room for disagreement and debate. What I am able to say is, for example, this is a good case where we need to separate out responsibility from praise and blame.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and the distinction here is like that someone might be responsible for something that they do, but we might not automatically praise or blame them for what they're responsible for in certain conditions, in particular if they were in a situation where they couldn't have known otherwise, right? So you can do the best you can in a pandemic, but if you're not given enough information to know what's kind of coming down the pike, you're still responsible for your actions, but we might not blame you as much as we would otherwise if you make a mistake. We might not praise you as much if you kind of happen to get lucky and do the right thing.
So specifically, are you sort of referring to policymakers or people choosing not to wear a mask, or?
I wasn't referring to those sorts of examples because let me think about this. Well, okay.
Maybe I should ask who you're referring to specifically.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I was
Leading the
thinking,
witness.
I was thinking more of just kind of you were asking about like individuals in my life or you know, and the choices that people are making. And I guess I think that people should listen to, for example, to the extent that there's science supporting the use of masks, then we should listen to that science and we should be wearing masks. And I think policymakers deserve responsibility and praise or blame for not recognizing how to manage a situation that involves a lot of uncertainty, for not listening to the science, because I think there's some of that, and for not being upfront about things. But I don't think we can blame policymakers for attempting to make projections forward based on the best evidence they have at the time, if there was something that they couldn't possibly know. So, for example, for a long time, we just didn't have any information on COVID-19. And so we didn't know how to treat people. We still don't know that much about how to treat people, but we have more information now. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I think that people made mistakes that were due to just not knowing what they were faced with. And that's a case where I think we need to separate responsibility for their actions from praise or blame, because this was an unknown quantity.
But there's
Doctors or policymakers?
I think, you know, I think if it's a case where people are trying to do the best they can, and there's no information available, and so they have to kind of effectively make a guess or project forward based on almost nothing, then we should allow some leeway. It's when people don't attend to what we seem to know or don't attend to the information that we have that we want to add praise or blame.
Isn't it interesting that people seem to assign this godlike ability to these professionals or to their policymakers, or humans seem to expect, it's like they really see these authorities as supernatural in their abilities almost.
Yeah, but I will say that there's an interesting split here, because when, especially in cases of when we're looking at medicine or other sorts of like biological processes that we think we have a lot of information about, then if we think we have a lot of information about it, then we do ascribe this kind of godlike status to the people that are making these decisions, as though like they know all the information maybe that we don't, and so we can just put our trust in them.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about that, about whether that's a good idea, but I think what happens is that this attitude is kind of carried over to a new situation where we don't have the information, and as a kind of population, we're not used to not having information. I mean, I like to think of it as sort of on a par with radical new technological developments. So, for example, like, you know, the time before the internet existed, right? There was a lot we just didn't know about what it would be like to have something like the internet, or maybe even like what it would be like to have smartphones. Or now, you know, think about the possibility of the rise of the machines. At least on Earth, this is kind of a big deal. I don't know what you guys have to deal with, but you know, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around the idea that, you know, we might be able to build machines that think better than people do, and that these machines might control us in some way or might not behave in ways that we can that we want to sanction. And I think that's absolutely right, and that we should be afraid of those possibilities. But there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know. And the pandemic is a bit like that. Like, it's just there's an open future there with radical unknowns.